Our first speaker today, we're very pleased to have Sara Scherr, who is Eco-Agriculture Partners in Washington, D.C. Sara is an agricultural and natural resource economist whose career has focused on agriculture and forest policy in tropical developing countries. She is founder and president of Eco-Agriculture Partners, an NGO that supports agricultural communities who manage landscapes both to increase production and incomes and to enhance wild biodiversity and ecosystem services. She's a member of the United Nations Environment Program Advisory Panel on Food Security, an amazing individual. We're very fortunate to have her today. And Sara, would you like to come up? And we're thrilled that you're here.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much to the Quivira Coalition for inviting me. It's really a pleasure. I want to talk for a little while this morning about the work you all are doing and putting it in a broader global context, because I think, as Courtney was mentioning, the work that you've been doing day in and day out as ranchers and supporting ranchers and other land managers is not only to protect New Mexico or Colorado or California or Nebraska or wherever all the rest of you all are from, but in fact, the way that you manage your land has global implications. It's a big challenge to be a farmer or a rancher anywhere in the world, and the pressures on farmers and ranchers are greater today than they have probably ever been. You're called upon to not only produce food in an increasingly constrained environment, but actually we're expecting with population growth and economic growth globally to require an increase of at least 50% in production around the world over just the next couple of decades. And the question of how we're going to do that sustainably is one of the big challenges, I think, for our society. We need to make sure that the farmer's family itself can continue to support itself well. Sustain your soil fertility and the resource base that you need to produce. Make sure you get secure access to water, again in a context in which water access is becoming more difficult in many parts of the U.S. and around the world. Managing your pests and diseases, managing your market risks and opportunities. But there's also two major new challenges that have become really important, or that we've been aware of being important over the last couple of decades. The first one is that farmers and ranchers actually are the stewards of most of the resources in the world in terms of land and water. And therefore, as other sectors of society are demanding more and more of those ecosystem services, good water quality, watershed protection, climate regulation, biodiversity conservation, they're really having to call on farmers and ranchers to do that, and yet are not always through their policies and programs actually supporting farmers and ranchers to do that, to play those kinds of roles. So we really need to be completely rethinking the relationship between farmers and ranchers and the rest of society in terms of the provision of these services. And then one of the things that I'm going to talk about particularly today is the challenge of adapting to and mitigating climate change, because I think farmers and ranchers are really at the front end of this. It's both the groups that are going to be potentially most disrupted by climate change, but also the group that can single-handedly make the greatest contribution to the problem. The term eco-agriculture, as we use it in my organization, refers to managing large landscapes for increased food production, for local livelihoods, and for the provision of ecosystem services. And usually that means a combination of what do you do on the farms and ranches with what you do in other public areas and private areas within the landscapes, so that the landscape as a whole has a healthy watershed, has healthy biodiversity, etc. And so it really involves the kind of collaboration that the Quivira Coalition has been championing here in the United States in ranching. I wanted to just, again, not get very much into the climate science, but I wanted to show this graph, which is a bit complicated, but I'll show you what it is. If you look at the 1900 to 2000 period, that's actually the surface temperature in centigrades, in degrees centigrade on the Earth, and you can see that that's been going up, consistent with the graph that Courtney had showed. The other graphs that you see here are from models. And one of the reasons why there is what seems to be more controversy about the models in climate than I think that scientists actually think there are, is that the models are trying to project what will happen in a very complex situation. And what I wanted to show here is that there are a number of different models. If you look at the yellow wiggle line that's down on the bottom there between 2000 and 2100, that shows the projected temperature rises if we stopped net emissions today. We would still get a rise, even if we stopped everything today. The other projections are from different groups of scientists that are making different kinds of assumptions about what's going to happen to energy use, what happens to clouds, what happens to oceans, what happens to all the many complex factors that influence the climate, so that some of the projections are showing that blue line, which is a very significant rise, but that would start to stabilize around 2 degrees centigrade higher than we have today on average. Others of the models show that green line, which shows that we would get up to more like 3.5 degrees. And then there's another set of models that have somewhat other projections that are that dark orange line, which shows even higher potential ones, with estimates of parts of Africa getting 8 degrees centigrade warmer by the end of the century. So we don't know where we're going to be because we don't know what's going to happen to any of those variables that go into the models. But what all the models show is this projection of climate change and this projection of average temperatures. The temperatures isn't the only thing that we really need to worry about if we're farmers and ranchers. The impacts that it's going to have on our production systems are partly because of the plants and animals responding to temperature changes, but it's also issues like what's the average maximum temperatures that are going to be happening, what's going to be happening to water, what's going to be happening to evapotranspiration from the soils, what's going to happen to pests and diseases, and what's going to be happening to a range of other variables that we really just don't know. But farmers are used to managing change. This will just be a lot of change. There also is expected to be more extreme events, like more floods and more droughts and things like that. And again, we have experience in dealing with those, but it's the scale and the degree of uncertainty we have that's really the challenge for farmers and ranchers. This is one model that just simply shows the projected impacts of climate change on the yields of what we call in the United States corn, of maize, which shows that the average yields could decline by 17%. Now you have to, again, this is one model. There's actually several models that show the different variations of this, that different parts of the world are going to suffer problems, those yellow and green and red areas of potential reduction in production. They do vary a lot. Some of the models for some parts of the United States are better than others. But this doesn't mean we will get those yield declines. It means that farmers will have to invest more in order to keep their yields the same, in an economic environment in which globally demand for food is increasing quite dramatically. So we need to be looking at much more than simply stabilizing our yields. So there are real issues that we should be beginning now, if we have not already, to plan for how we're going to adapt to just simply more risk in our climatic situation. And that's a smart thing to do, whatever your feelings are about climate change or whatever your feelings are about policy.